Hey y'all, howdy, welcome to One for the Books. I'm Sandy Broadwell, and this is the mid-year freakout tag. I love doing this tag every year, and this is my third year on BookTube, but I think I started my channel, one of my very first videos actually was the mid-year tag, so I think this is my fourth time filming this, which is wild. I'm not either third or fourth. Anyway, I'll link the other ones down below. But basically, this tag is a series of questions about how your reading year is going so far. And even though this isn't an official question on the tag, I'm gonna add it in, which is, how is your reading year going so far? As question number one. I'll have all the questions down in the description box below. So my reading year is not going great. You might have noticed the lack of videos on my channel the last few months. I've been in a pretty big slump since April, so I think that's right, or maybe even March. Yeah, the last few months have not been great. Just in terms of reading, my life is going just fine. But I have a new house, I have a new job, all of those things are keeping me very busy, and I just haven't had as much capacity to read. I have been watching more things, I think because that's an easier kind of turn off at the end of the day, for my brain, I mean. Almost all these questions I do have bookish answers for, but there's one or two that I want to add in some shout outs to things I've been watching that I've really enjoyed. So that's how my reading year is going. It's going slowly. I think at this point, I have read 26 books, and that's about half of what I had been reading the last 2 years at this point of the year. But also at the same time, I was like unemployed for those years. So like maybe this is my new normal, but I hope not, because I've really only finished at like 2 books a month for the last like 3 months in a row. And I'd really like that to be more like 4 to 6 books a month. So we'll see. But now into the official tag questions. Kicking off with a bang, as always, the first question is, what is the best book you've read so far in 2024? And I feel like sometimes this is hard to answer, but this year it is not. It is such an easy answer, and for me that is Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. Maybe I should scoot over so I can have space to put up images. Blood Over Brighthaven left me breathless. I was on the edge of my seat. I was crying. I was gripped from the very first page. It kicks off with a bang. It ends with a bang. It is a wild ride. I absolutely love that book. It is not just my favorite book so far this year. It is one of my new favorite books of all time. I can't wait to reread it. Amazing. So just to give you a little bit about what this book is about, it is a fantasy novel, dark academia, and it is about a woman who wants to become the first ever high mage. And women have been restricted from this role in the past, but she is very talented. Her first chapter kicks off with her performing the test to become the high mage. And it just goes full throttle from there. There is a lot of inequity in the society that she lives in. The city that she lives in is kind of in a protective bubble, like a force field almost of magic that keeps out this horrible force that disintegrates people, and it strikes at random. And so there's lots of refugees who come to this city trying to escape this blight, they call it, but very few usually survive to get there, and then once the refugees do arrive, if they actually make it to the city, their conditions that they have to live in are not good. And our high mage is our main character. She's been born in the city and grew up there, and so she has had a level of privilege to not really see what's happening in terms of what's going on with the refugees in her city. There's a lot of social commentary on all of that throughout the book. There's also, if you love an academic setting, there's plenty of that. It's a hard magic system that I thought was extremely well done. The magic system reminded me a lot of how I think of coding, and they use these cool magical machines called spellographs. I just absolutely loved everything about this book. I had a great time from start to finish and was just devastated buy it. So if any of that sounds good to you, highly, highly recommend picking up Blood Over Brighthaven. The second question is, what is the best sequel that you've read so far in 2025? I haven't actually read that many sequels this year, surprisingly. Well, maybe it's not surprising since I told you I've only read like 26 books, but I would say my most comforting sequel that I read so far this year was Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales. This is the third and final book in the Emily Wilde series, and it felt so good to read that book. I was also having a really hard time at the time when I was reading that book. My brother was in the hospital and I was staying with him and trying to take care of him and his daughter when that was all going on, and reading an Emily Wilde book at that time was just really comforting to me to be back in that world with those characters that I care about so much. So I think if you liked the first two books in the Emily Wilde series, you will definitely not be let down by the conclusion to the trilogy. But if you're not aware, Emily Wilde is a series about a scholar in the early 1900s. She is a dryadologist, which means that she studies fairies. And she is a very prickly academic character, very studious, and she doesn't really pick up a lot on social cues, whereas her colleague slash academic rival partner is a character named Wendell Bambleby, and he is the exact opposite of Emily in every way. He's very charismatic and gregarious and outgoing and just the life of the party, and everyone loves him, and she thinks that his scholarly work is trash. And they just have a really fun dynamic. Their banter is super good, and the conclusion to the story is very heartwarming. They end up going into the land of fairy. Lots of crazy things happen there in almost all of the books, and it's a really good time. If that sounds good to you, definitely recommend Emily Wilde. Number 3 is a new release that you haven't read yet but want to. And my answer for this is almost a cheat because I wrote down my answers like yesterday, and yesterday evening my library hold came in for my answer for this question, and that is The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. That was probably my most anticipated release from the first half of the year that I hadn't gotten to yet. So I did just start reading that last night, and I'm only about 4% of the way in. So I've barely started, but I'm very excited to read The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. It is his first book that I will have read that is not part of his first law world. And The Devils is about a bishop, I think, or some clergyman set back in like the medieval times, but if that time had devils and elves and things like that kind of mingling in with our real world. Already, just having read 4%, it has Joe Abercrombie's like classic gritty world, strong characters right off the bat, and a lot of humor. So I have really enjoyed the first, chapters that I have read from that, and I'm excited to see what it's going to hold for me. Question number 4 is my most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And I have actually quite a few books that I'm excited about coming out in the second half of the year. I think I will be doing an anticipated releases video, probably posted next weekend. So look out for that if you want to hear about more anticipated sci-fi and fantasy releases in the next 6 months. But probably if I was only to choose one, it would be Catabasis or Catabasis, I don't know how to say it, but this is R.F. Kuang's newest book, and I have read everything that R.F. Kuang has ever written. This one is, I think, about 2 academic rivals who have to go to hell to save their advisor, which just sounds like a silly romp, but I have a feeling that R.F. Kuang is going to bring a lot of depth to it, so really looking forward to that. And then I can't talk about anticipated releases coming out in 2025 without also mentioning Stranger Things. I love Stranger Things. Obviously, this is a television series on Netflix, but the 5th and final season is finally coming out at the end of this year, and I'm very, very excited to see how this series concludes. The question number 5 is your biggest disappointment of the year, and for me, that is also a pretty easy answer this year, and that is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This is a book that has been really hyped, has been very popular for a few years now. It is about a woman who takes a job at an aquarium. She's grieving the loss of her son, and she befriends an octopus named Marcellus, and Marcellus is a point of view character. We get to read some from Marcellus's point of view. I really loved those aspects of the book. However, I thought Marcellus was not as big of a character as I had wanted him to be, and also like half of the book or more is from the perspective of a character named Cameron, who is absolutely insufferable. I could not stand Cameron. I thought he was an absolute waste of a human being and a waste of page time. And he supposedly had this like character arc and a lot of growth right at the end of the book, but it all felt very forced. I did not think that that was earned. I did not think that his behavior up to that point justified his sudden change of heart, and really just thought this was the most mediocre of books. So big disappointment from me. I was really looking forward to reading more about the octopus. Question number 6 is biggest surprise. This one, I don't really have any that really come to mind for biggest surprise. To me, a surprise is like, I went into it like with middling expectations and then it really blew me out of the water. The one that most comes to mind when I think of this is Live Suit by James S.A. Corey. And it's not really a surprise because I do love James S.A. Corey. I loved the Expanse series. I loved their new book, In the Captives War. And the Live Suit is a short story that is in the world of the Captives War series, but it doesn't have anything to do really with the first book. You can read it completely as a standalone. And I was just really wowed by the punch that it packed in so few pages and how much depth it had for the short read that it was. But it really kind of has stuck with me and has left me feeling a little bit haunted, and I think that was the perfect little like sci-fi horror novella to kick off the year with. So yeah, that was a good surprise. Number 7 is favorite new author, and this can be a debut author or a new to me author. However, I don't pick favorite authors based off of a single read. For me, it's usually like maybe after I've read 3 books and I had a really great experience with all of them, then that's into new favorite author territory. Or if I have an author that I've read a series from, I usually don't go off just one series because that's still kind of one story to me, but if I read a series by them and something else and I really liked all of it, then that's a favorite author. So my new favorite author in 2025 so far is actually Taylor Jenkins Reid. Shocker, I know, because this is not a sci-fi or fantasy author, which is usually my go-to, but I have now read 3 books by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read her 2 most popular, which were The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six. I absolutely loved both of those books, and just yesterday I finished Atmosphere, which is her newest release that I was super duper excited about because it is about a woman astronaut in the 1980s, and I absolutely love stories about NASA. I love space. I love historical women in STEM fields. So this really, like, just from the description alone, I was super hyped about, and it did not let me down. I was absolutely wrecked last night as I was finishing this book when I only had, like, I was reading it on my Kindle because it was a library book, and it said I only had like 18 minutes left in the book, and I was like, how can there only be 18 minutes left? We have so much to cover. And I was so devastated. I was crying very, very hard. It was an absolute gut punch. It was so good. And I will say, this book was not flawless to me. It did some really basic explanations at the beginning of the story that I was kind of like, oh no, here we go, where it was just like explaining like how an airlock works. And for me, as like a regular sci-fi reader and fan of science for my entire life, I was like, yeah, we all know how airlocks work. So I was a little worried about that at the beginning, but then it very quickly like moved past all of that. It didn't bother me once I got into the story. And then the other thing that I thought was a little off about this book was that some of the use of language felt a little too modern for like the early to mid 80s setting that this book was supposed to have. But to be honest, none of that bothered me whatsoever. I gave this book 5 stars. I would give it 5 stars all day. I had such a good time reading it. I was enthralled. I was captivated. I did not want to put it down. Absolute magnificent read. Would highly recommend to anyone. So congrats, Taylor Jenkins Reid, for making it onto my list of favorite authors. Question number 8 is newest fictional crush. And I do not really get crushes from books, or at least I don't think I have since I was a teenager probably. But I will say I have watched the Bridgertons this year, and I can't say that I necessarily have a crush on any of the characters, but they are all very fine to look at. So that was an entertaining show on multiple levels. That's all I have to say about that. Question number 9 is your newest favorite character. And I don't have a huge standout, but I will say that I absolutely loved Mosscap from the Monk and Robot series by Becky Chambers. Mosscap is the robot who comes into human society after centuries of separation to try and find out what is it that humans need. And I just thought he was a delightful It was a delightful character. I really enjoyed Mosscap. I really found those books to be very cozy. Not really a lot happens, but it was my first ever cozy sci-fi read. Yeah, it was a good time. Number 10 is a book that made me cry. I've already mentioned Blood Over Brighthaven and now Atmosphere are definitely 2 that made me cry. But one that I have not mentioned yet that is absolutely worth mentioning is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This was the first book that I read this year and is one of my favorite reads of the year so far. It is a sci-fi horror in kind of like a psychological body horror sort of way. Our Wives Under the Sea is about 2 women who are married. One of them goes on is like a marine biologist, I think, and goes on this undersea expedition for her job. And something goes horribly wrong. She's down there for way longer than she's supposed to be. Her wife on shore thinks that she is dead. And then she eventually does come back, but is changed by what happened down there. And you never really find out what happened down there. It's left kind of very suspenseful, very like it's kind of left up to your imagination. But I absolutely grieved for this couple. Just was very weirded out by everything that was going on, and I cried so much when I read this book as well. I don't normally, I would say, I don't normally cry a lot, but wow, yeah, I've had some pretty devastating reads this year, and that was one of them. Number 11 is a book that made me happy. I don't read a ton of happy things, but like I already mentioned, the 3rd Emily Wilde book and also the Monk and Robot series were both very cozy reads to me this year that put me in a good space. Number 12 is my favorite book to film adaptation that I saw this year. I think I've only seen 2 book to film adaptations, and for both of them I have not actually read the book that they were adapted from. But my answer for this is pretty easy, and that is The Eternaut on Netflix. The Eternaut is a 6-episode sci-fi series, at least the first season. Season 2 hasn't come out yet. It is based on an Argentinian graphic novel from the 1980s, and it was absolutely magnificent. I was on the edge of my seat every episode. I don't want to give anything away, but basically the very first scene that happens is there's like 3 teenage girls. They're out on a boat. They're like just hanging out, like having a good time. And one of them goes like underneath the boat to like grab something, and you see like a single flake of snow fall, and it's clearly summertime. And then the 2 girls who are like up on the surface of the boat just fall over dead. Incredible start. Every episode was great. I cannot wait for there to be a season 2. I have thought about all those episodes for hours after they ended, and I cannot wait to see where it's going to go. Number 13 is the most beautiful book that you've bought or received so far in 2025. I haven't bought that many books this year, but I did by the last two books of the, what's the series called? The Empire of the Wolf trilogy by Richard Swan. The first one is called The Justice of Kings, and I just love Martina Fakova is the name of the illustrator, artist who makes the cover art for this series, and I would buy anything that she makes. They're just absolutely gorgeous book covers. I had a really good time reading the Empire of the Wolf series. And finally, question number 14 is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And I'm so far behind on my TBR that I set out for myself at the beginning of the year, just because, like I said, I've only been reading like 2 books a month for the last several months. So I'm probably not going to reach a lot of my reading goals that I had for myself this year. But I made a 25 books to read in 2025 video, so I have a bunch of those that I need to read. I had set out a goal to read 8 classics this year. I am trying to participate in the Buzzwordathon reading challenge and also r/fantasy bingo. So in order to fulfill all of those prompts, I just have a ton of books that I still need to read. So again, probably not going to make it, but it'll be fun to try, and hopefully you guys will stay with me along the ride. I would love to hear your answers to some of these questions, so be sure to comment down below and let me know what are some of your best and worst reads that you've read so far in 2025, and hopefully I can add them to my ever-growing list of books to read. Thanks so much for tuning in and hanging out for a little bit today. As always, please be kind, read more books, and hit the subscribe button down below for more bookish content to come. I'll see you again soon.